Okay, so now we are going to talk about the third part of the chapter, going beyond linearity. So, as you remember, we've already seen this noun phrase, the wicked dog with the yellow teeth. Okay, and we already know that dog is the head of the noun phrase. And this noun phrase is composed, as you can see, of several words. It starts with an article, the, followed by an adjective, wicked. Then we've got the noun dog, then a preposition, with, followed by another article, the again, then another adjective, yellow, and finally the noun teeth. Now, the question that we may ask ourselves is, how can we really conceive of this noun phrase? Should we see these words as a kind of row of pearls on a string? Indeed, when we pronounce it or when we read it, we will see words one by one. So, is it how it's perceived and understood? That's called the linearity of language, the idea that words are pronounced and perceived one by one after the other. But as you may have gathered from the idea that we've got a head in this noun phrase, there's actually a notion of hierarchy in this noun phrase. So, how can we understand this? Well, first, we can see that within this big noun phrase, the words with the yellow teeth form a whole, form an entity within the noun phrase. And then we've got a higher structure, which is the whole noun phrase, the wicked dog with the yellow teeth. So actually, this idea of linearity does not really represent the way we have to understand the structure of the noun phrase, which has to be seen in terms of hierarchy, in terms of structure. So, for instance, we can look at this noun phrase in more detail. So, it is composed of 4 slots. All noun phrases can be seen as being composed of 4 slots. The first slot is the determiner slot. Here it's an article in blue. It's followed by a second slot which directly precedes the head and which is called the pre-modifier, pre-modification. Okay? Here the word that pre-modifies dog is an adjective, the adjective wicked. Then we have the noun dog, which is the head of the noun phrase, and it is followed by what is called post-modification, a post-modifier, in this particular case with the yellow teeth, which is called a prepositional phrase. Okay? Note, obviously, that not all slots have to be filled. For instance, quite often you've got no pre-modifier or no post-modifier. Okay, now interestingly, if we look at the post-modification in more detail, we will see that it is composed of a preposition, with, followed by the yellow teeth. And the yellow teeth is another noun phrase. So we can see that this general structure of the noun phrase is also true for a smaller noun phrase which is located within the bigger noun phrase. Okay, so with is a preposition. Prepositions are used to introduce noun phrases. And so the preposition is followed by the yellow teeth, which is a second noun phrase within the bigger noun phrase. And so it is also composed of slots, the first slot being the determination slot, the article the. Then once again we have the pre-modification slot, the adjective yellow, followed by the head slot, the noun teeth. In this particular case, there is no post-modification after the head, so the final slot is empty. Okay, so this shows that rather than this notion of pearls on a string, we should really see the structure of the noun phrase as with the metaphor of the Russian dolls. Okay, we've got a smaller doll within a bigger doll. Okay, and so there's another term that is important to memorize. It's the term of embedding or embedded NP. In French, we would say enchâssé. It's the idea that the smaller noun phrase, the yellow teeth, is embedded within the prepositional phrase with the yellow teeth, which post-modifies the bigger noun phrase, the wicked dog with the yellow teeth. Okay, so the smaller noun phrase, the smaller NP, the yellow teeth, is embedded within a bigger NP. Okay, so remember, these 4 slots are one way of looking at all noun phrases, and sometimes some slots are empty. Okay. Now, let's look at another NP as another example. So it's Arya Stark is the youngest sister of the new king in the north, and we're going to focus on the noun phrase in orange. So my first question is, how many nouns do we have in this noun phrase? Okay, that's pretty easy. We have 3 nouns, sister, king, and north. Okay, now second question you have to ask yourselves is, where is the head of the NP? And the head is, as you may have imagined, sister. Okay, now these fairly easy questions are necessary to then look at the structure of the NP in more detail, because this noun phrase is more complex than the previous one we saw. Okay, so one question would be, which structure best describes the NP? As you can see, we've used square brackets to delimit the noun phrase and the parts of the noun phrase. So as you can see in the first example, we've got 3 isolated pairs of brackets. In the second one, we have a different organization, with of the new king being separate, and then in the north being separate from of the new king. And the third example is different, with the final NP included in the second NP, which in turn is included in the bigger NP. So the structure which best describes the NP is the third one, with the brackets as indicated. So now how can we explain why this is the right way of looking at the noun phrase? Well, all of these suggestions include that we've got 3 units. That's right, we have 3 NPs in this sentence. But the problem with the first version of the answer is that the hierarchy is wrong, okay? The first answer suggests that all the NPs are equal in terms of structure. This is not true. Now, what about the second answer? The second answer is not true either, because in the north is not included in the second noun phrase the new king, sorry. And you have to understand that what we mean here is that it's the king in the north, okay? The information included in the north is necessary to identify which king we're talking about. So in the north has to be included in the noun phrase whose head is king, okay? Otherwise you cannot identify the king. The version that we've got in number 2 suggests that it's the sister who is in the north, okay? And that is not right. This is why number 3 is the right answer, because it proves that in the north is embedded within the noun phrase that includes king. Indeed, it's necessary to understand which king we're talking about. It's not any king, it's the king in the north. And then this NP, the new king in the north, is embedded within a prepositional phrase, which is embedded within the bigger NP. It post-modifies the sister, okay, which is the head of the larger NP. Right, so as you can see, this question of structure is very important, and one way of describing the structure is by using square brackets, as we've done here, but we can also present this in a more visual way, okay, as you can see here. So the idea is to help you to understand that, once again, in the north is included in the second structure of the new king in the north, and that these 2 are included within the biggest one, the youngest sister of the new king in the north, okay? So in these examples, prepositions are indicated in black, okay? Noun phrases in red, and so in the north is a prepositional phrase which post-modifies king, and of the new king in the north is another prepositional phrase which post-modifies the noun sister in the largest NP. Okay, so once again, you understand why the Russian dolls metaphor works quite well. Okay, now let's look in more detail at the rest of the noun phrase. So we'll look at this example. The odd-looking guy who's making a funny face is President of the United States. And once again, we're focusing on the orange part of the sentence. So, as you may have gathered, guy is the head of the noun phrase and it's a noun. Nothing new here. Then the determiner slot is filled with the, which is an article. And then the pre-modifying slot is odd-looking, and odd-looking is an adjective, more precisely a compound adjective. Okay, now what is important here is the structure which is used as a post-modifier of guy. And this time what we have is who is making a funny face, and that's a relative clause. Okay, quite often relative clauses are used to post-modify nouns. So far we had seen examples where post-modification was filled with a prepositional phrase, as in the previous examples, but this slot can also be filled by a relative clause. Okay, relative clauses are clauses including a verb, and they're usually introduced by words like who, which, that, for instance. Okay, now let's look at another example. Once again, we're focusing on the orange part. He's Cartman's best friend. So how can we fill the slots? As you can see here, we've used the same color code. The names of the slots are not repeated, but if you remember, determination, then pre-modification, then head, and then post-modification. Okay, so the head of the noun phrase is friend. It's a noun. Then what else do we have? So this suggests that we've got no post-modification in this particular noun phrase. The slot is empty. Now, what else do we have? We have best, which is an adjective in the superlative form. This is the pre-modifier of the noun phrase. And then we have Cartman's. What can we do with Cartman's? Well, even if it includes a noun, Cartman is a proper noun, well, the best way to understand its role in the noun phrase is to see that it can be replaced with other elements like his best friend, or it can be filled with other words like the, okay, my, the, and this is the slot that corresponds to determination. Okay, so Cartman's acts as a determiner in this noun phrase. It's called a genitive. Now, let's see another example. Okay, once again, we're focusing on the orange noun phrase, gold watches. Shorter one this time. So as you can see, watch is the head of the noun phrase. This time, again, there's no post-modification. And then what else do we have? Well, this time we have zero determiner, okay? So we have to use this symbol to indicate that the determiner slot is empty. And then what about gold? Well, as you may understand, gold fills the pre-modifier slot. But what is noticeable about gold is that it's not an adjective, it's a noun. So it's interesting to realize that nouns can also be pre-modifiers. As you know, the adjective that corresponds to the noun gold is the adjective golden. So this really shows that gold is not an adjective, it's a noun. Okay, there is an adjective, golden, but we can use nouns as pre-modifiers in English, and it's actually quite frequent. Okay, so this is all we need to do today, and but maybe we can look at other things in more detail.